Hayden Ludwig is with the Capital Research Center out of Washington, D.C., also with Influence Watch. And you guys, if you watched a couple of my last shows last week, we were talking about the organizations that are actually behind the illegal immigration and the caravans that we have coming up. And really, to me, this is what really has to be exposed. The enemies within, the organizations and individuals that are working actively to undermine our government and undermine our rule of law. This is the story that's not being told. So Hayden Ludwig, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Ben. Glad to be here.
We got a little bit of echo. Hang on one second. Let me get rid of that. So I was doing some research, and actually the research I was doing was research that you guys had already done on the caravan, migrant caravan. First off, tell everybody what you do, what Capital Research Center does, and specifically the Influence Watch that you're a part of.
Sure. So Capital Research Center was established in 1984. We are America's investigative think tank. So Influence Watch is our growing encyclopedia on the left. So every left-wing activist, foundation, George Soros character, you name it, we have all those guys in our database. We're constantly building out profiles on organizations that are trying to turn America blue effectively.
Awesome. And that was one of those things when I was reading it. It was information that I didn't find anywhere else. I've been a part of this. I don't know if you follow any of what we do at Frontline America or out here, but I've been down on the border working with groups along the border, people in Mexico and in America, in Arizona, California, Texas, all across the border, that are standing up against the lawlessness that's going on. And specifically in regards to the caravan that's been coming in, getting a lot of press lately, and in my opinion, agree with President Trump that it's an invasion of our sovereignty. And the part that I kept coming back to that I couldn't get the information on was who is organizing this? Who is behind this? Who are the organizations that are leading this? What's the funding mechanisms? And what's their agenda? What's the intent? You go down there, we had people say, oh, it's all spontaneous. There's nobody really organizing this, nobody really leading this. But that's not the case, is it?
No, and I think that's exactly how the professional left wants you to think about them, as not professional. I mean, nobody spontaneously gets up, puts their kid in a stroller, and then hikes for thousands of miles through 3 countries illegally. You just don't do that. So
right.
This is just another project, professional left-wing activists, and frankly, all of them following extreme far-left ideologies, Marxist-Leninist ideologies to be specific.
Absolutely, yeah, and we see that. Interesting if you look at the history of Honduras and going back. So I don't know if you want to walk through that process. So the groups that you guys have uncovered that are a part of that, specifically, I want to target the American groups that are using taxpayer laws and protections to help organize this from Honduras, from Guatemala, and some of their history. I know Pueblo Sin Fonteras is brought up. But interestingly enough, the leftists within the same globalists, and this is what I say, and I'd be interested in your take on this. We're in a civil war right now, a cultural civil war for the future of America, but we're also in a global war against the globalists that want no borders, no nations, and basically a redistribution of wealth to the nations around the world, led by one world, communist government that organizes it and runs it. And that's what I see. Do you see the same thing?
I see a lot of that as well. I'll give you an example. So we're really talking about 3 organizations that are really 3 heads of the same hydra. The main one you've already spelled out is Pueblo Sin Fonteras. That's People Without Borders. The other 2 are Centro Sin Fronteras, Center Without Borders, and then another group called La Familia Latina Unida, which means the United Latin Family. It's all kind of a complicated network, but it's really run by a handful of people. One of them is a woman called Emma Lozano. She's a pastor out of United Methodist Church in Chicago. Lozano, to your point, Lozano was part of a group called CASA. It's now defunct, but back in the 1980s, she entered into extreme left-wing activism with this group, which was described by friends as far left and Marxist-Leninist, that dreamed of a world without borders. So it kind of gives you a little bit of background about how these people think. And Pueblo Sin Fonteras, I mean, the name speaks for itself, right? People without borders. They really do see themselves as, well, in their words, wherever they go, they are citizens of that country. I think my favorite quotation from them has to be, "We didn't cross the border crossed us."
Yeah. And Guillermo, you're laughing at that.
Yeah. Hey, let me ask you this question, and I think it's something that all of us are concerned about. If you're a conservative, we know about these groups. You know what I mean? We don't like them. We know that they exist. We might not know all the names and who's behind all the funding, but to me, it just seems that the American people don't, at this point in time, they don't care until we find that smoking gun, until we can prove, hey, look, your tax dollars are going to fund this, or you have American citizens, just breaking the law doing this. Or are we ever going to see anything come out of it? I know there's a recent court case even that said that really there's no liability if people encourage someone to break the law and come here illegally. To me, we desperately need the research, and we need to figure out who these people are. But at the end of the day, how are we going to translate that into the American people caring that, hey, look, these people didn't get here by themselves. They didn't wake up. They didn't have an epiphany.
Guillermo, that's a great question. Hayden, can you hang on after the break, and we'll get into that, and then a little dig deeper into the organizations themselves? We got Hayden Ludwig of Influence Watch and CRC. This is Talk Radio 1680 KGED. Ben Bergquam with Guillermo Moreno on 1680. If you guys want to join the show, 559-442-1680 is the number. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the program. In studio, I was coming in hot from Modesto, going out there in support of Ronell Singh and his family with the arraignment that was going on today that officially charged the illegal alien, a murderer, suspected murderer, first-degree murder with enhanced circumstances that could give him the death penalty. The crazy thing in California, we know that will never happen either, unfortunately. Even when you murder a police officer, you have leftists in the state of California that want to protect him.
No, Ben, I do have the charge report here.
Oh, perfect.
And so they're charging him obviously with felony murder, violation of the penal code there. And then you're right, the enhancement here is pretty much saying, hey, let's give this guy the worst that we can give him, which is absolutely, I think, well.
How many leftist organizations will come out and say you can't kill somebody who's here illegally?
I don't know. I'm seeing something different this time around in respect to how they're going to treat this guy. Yeah, they're coming out saying, oh, this happened kind of before the whole sanctuary city thing. But I haven't really heard of or maybe you have, a left wing organization really coming out and saying, you know what? This guy's a good guy. This is the guy we're definitely gonna go down and support. The Democrats are they're incompetent, but they're not that dumb.
Yeah, you might be right. I don't know. But you had Kevin Allion come out and and say his condolences to the family. But then as soon as it was found out that this guy was illegal, he shuts up. He goes away. And I think that really. This is a no-win for the left, and so they're just trying to ignore it as much as possible. That's the way I see it. So
yeah, no. Ben, you were there. You were there at the vigil last week. You were there today at the arraignment. The courtroom was pretty packed.
Yeah, it was standing room only, and this actually, in fact, it was packed. You couldn't get in. We weren't able to get in. But what really irritated me was they allowed the defendant's family in first, and some of Ronell's family and friends were not allowed in because they took all the seats. And that, I don't know if that's just procedure or protocol for all cases. Again, it's innocent until proven guilty. So that, but in cases like this where the guy did it. Yeah. The guy did it. He's guilty. It just made me sick watching his family and friends go in before Ronell's family was able to go in and get those seats. But I want to get back to our guest who's on the line, Hayden Ludwig of Capital Research Center and the Influence Watch, or just Influence Watch, not the Influence Watch. We're talking about, and it all ties together. So this issue that we have with the law enforcement officer killed by an illegal alien all goes back to the undermining of our sovereignty by leftists, globalists, communists, Marxists that want to undermine our sovereignty, that don't believe in borders, that don't believe in walls. Before the break, we were talking about three groups in particular: Centro Sin Fronteras, Pueblo Sin Fonteras, and La Familia Unida.
Latina Familia Unida.
Yeah. But you asked a question, Guillermo, of Hayden. What's it going to take to wake people up across our country? And this is like today, up there in Modesto, or last Friday when we were there, and thousands of people showed up for this officer that was killed. And people were all saying the same thing. Why are we protecting illegal aliens? What is it going to take? That's a great question. I don't know if you've got the answer, but I would love to ask you, Hayden.
Well, I'll tell you what it's not going to take. It's the mainstream media. They're never going to report on, the facts as we see them. I think a lot of the narrative that I uncovered actually was what the media wasn't reporting. Shocking, yes. I know. I'll give you an example. When I started doing research into this mysterious Pueblo Sin Fonteras group I kept reading about on blog sites and stuff, that was back in October. The narrative was that this whole migrant caravan was just spontaneous and It came out of nowhere, and there was certainly no professional activists involved in it. I came back from Thanksgiving only to find that, in fact, Pueblo, which had been denying that it was involved, suddenly CNN, LA Times, Washington Post, New York Times are all saying, yeah, Pueblo Sin Fronteras organized a lot of this caravan. So
yeah, I noticed that. I noticed that in the research. Yeah, I noticed that in the research as well, that they were trying to cover it up or just ignore it, hope it went away. And then now it's, yep, they're a part of it. How deep do they go? So Pueblo Sin Fonteras is a nonprofit. They're a 501c4, correct?
I'll clarify. So the La Familia group you're talking about is registered as a 501c4, while the Centro Sin Fronteras, the center, is a 501c3. Pueblo itself appears to be kind of a project of both those groups.
Gotcha.
All three of them work out of a couple different buildings, the big one being a church that Emma Lozano runs in Chicago.
Along with Walter Coleman? Is that her husband? Okay. Yeah, and so this is what people don't understand. This was breaking news to me when I first heard this. What we have going on with these caravans, and not just these caravans, but this has been going on. Centro Sin Fonteras was started in 1987, correct?
That's right.
This has been going on for decades by individuals in America. Now, the biggest shock to me was and you mentioned her, Emma Lozano, but the other organizer, La Familia Latina Unida, Elvira Arellano, she is an illegal alien, correct?
That's right. Arellano's been deported at least once by ICE. She currently has a stay of deportation last I checked, and so she's still living somewhere in the United States.
A stay based on what?
That's a great question. I know she came here in the late 1990s and was deported and promptly walked past over the border again. She went up to Chicago eventually, and she worked under a false Social Security number while in the States. So it's anybody's guess why a judge thought she should stay in the country.
So this is why I'm going to continue to highlight this. This person needs to be deported. This organization needs to be shut down. Any tax dollars that go to this organization need to be shut down. And in the people that are organizing, aiding and abetting criminal activity to undermine our sovereignty need to be arrested. How is this allowed to go on? I don't know if you're an attorney. I don't know what your background is, Hayden. But how are these organizations able to get away with this?
Well, I'm certainly not an attorney, but what I would tell you is the most troubling thing is that Ms. Lozano has used her position as a pastor at a church, a 501c3 tax-exempt organization. She's used that power in order to make herself a proponent for her radical ideology. This last election, she actually endorsed multiple candidates for public office, which I work for a 501c3 nonprofit. We would never dream of doing something like that because the IRS is supposed to come down on you like a brick if you do that. That's why you get a tax exemption, not so you can engage in political activity, but so that you can educate people. Yeah.
Well, so I'm one of those people that I believe the Johnson Amendment was unconstitutional. I hope that's overturned at some point. But I definitely see the double standard where if it was a Christian or a true Christian conservative organization advocating for a political candidate you know the IRS would have come down on them. But because it's a leftist organization and many others, we see this all the time. We have all of these sanctuary, hundreds, 800 sanctuary churches across the country that are protecting illegal aliens, that are training. I was in LA at a church down there, similar church, that was working on training illegal aliens on how to break our sovereignty and how to get through the loopholes on the sanctuary policy. I was removed in handcuffs while illegal aliens were being trained in the basement of this so-called church. And it's going on across our country. It's unbelievable to me.
Well, look, Ben, I mean, there's organizations out there that they play fast and loose with what their real position is. There's a coalition called CARA, C-A-R-A. It's an acronym that stands for the 4 different organizations that are part of it, each one of them an immigration kind of organization. They all have attorneys that provide pro bono legal services for illegal immigrants who make it into the country. Now, they'll all talk, I've spoken with them before, they'll all tell you that of course they don't encourage illegal immigrants to cross the country into the country illegally. But come on, when you're dangling pro bono legal services and advice in front of these people that would normally cost thousands of dollars that they certainly can't afford, you can't tell me it's humanitarian to encourage people to cross Mexico illegally on foot. It's dangerous.
No, absolutely. Hey, this is Guillermo here. Do tax dollars go to these groups? I guess that's my first question. And my second question is, do they have any partners in these countries that they partner with?
So, Guillermo, I would clarify that to my knowledge, there's no U.S. tax dollars going toward these organizations. I should stress that funding to all of these groups that we're talking about, the data is there's very little of it. And what I do know is troubling enough. I'll give you an example. Centros and Fronteras has received tens of thousands of dollars from an organization called the National Immigration Forum. It's one of these illegal immigration advocacy nonprofits. The National Immigration Forum, in turn, was funded by George Soros's Open Society foundations. This is typical of the kind of funding that we find with these kinds of organizations. So I wouldn't say that the U.S. government's involved, but it's bad enough that organizations that fund professional activist politics are involved.
But so the government, I guess, would be involved in the sense that this lady here is essentially utilizing the tax code by being a 501c3 and not having to pay any taxes on that income, right? That's essentially how we would see the.
Right, I follow. What I would say is she's taking advantage of her tax-exempt status to basically push the limits of what she can get away with as a nonprofit. The other side of this, too, is Pueblo Sin Fonteras really funding all these people in that last caravan to march through? It doesn't appear that they were the ones that were funding it so much they were the ones that were providing organizers. I know for a fact that there are people who were down there who list themselves as spokesmen for Pueblo Sin Fonteras. At least one of them was arrested in Mexico by Mexican immigration officials. So
I was reading. So there was one, Alex Meji. I don't know how to pronounce the last name.
Is his name.
Mensing.
Yeah, American.
And then Ronaldo.
There was Roberto Corona is listed as one of the founders, although I can't find much to substantiate that. But another man named Ireneo Mujico, if I have my facts right, is a Mexican American, and he was arrested in Mexico earlier last year, supporting the caravan.
Yeah, and so this is one of those things. When we're down there, there's so much misinformation, so much that's hidden, and that's what we're trying to get to. One of the things. So even when we say it's not taxpayer funded, if they're grants, if we get to like where they're actually getting their funding from, some of that comes from private organizations like Open Society Foundation, but others. How many of these organizations receive taxpayer grants? And that's something I'd like. I don't have the answer to that. I'd like to get the answer to it. I don't know if you've got information on that as well.
Well, it's all very obscure, and they want to keep it that way. The question I'd like answered is, if it wasn't Pueblo and it wasn't the National Immigration Forum, it wasn't any of these normal groups that nobody can find funding all of the water and the food and the supplies and the trucks and the men who are passing all these things out to the caravanners while they're in Mexico, who was funding all of that?
Right.
That's a big question.
Millions of dollars. When you look at the organization, for the first 8,000 plus people that came, now I've heard numbers of 40,000 in this next wave of caravan. It's millions and millions of dollars to really fund an attack on American sovereignty.
Yeah. Hayden, is there any cooperation? There has to be cooperation with Pueblo Sin Fonteras, the Latinos. I'm not even going to try to get it. Are there, we got a commercial break, but I want to know, are these countries, do they have their own version in that country to receive the money? Or do they have their other organizational units? They have Spanish names. So I'm assuming, that's to gain some kind of favor in that country. So are they working with anybody in their host country, I guess? Would be my question after the break.
Again, Hayden Ludwig of the Capital Research Center and Influence Watch is our guest, getting to the bottom of the caravan and the organizations that are funding it and behind it. It's Talk Radio 1680. We will be right back.
And now, here's your host, Ben Bergquam.
Huge special thanks to Maddie and Molly for bringing in my new shirt. I was wearing, actually underneath this shirt that I'm wearing right now is my CNN is fake news shirt. That actually came from Molly as well, but my new shirt says America first.
Build the wall.
Build the wall, baby. Build the wall. Build the wall. Come on, everybody. Build the wall.
Build the wall.
Thank you.
There you go.
Maddie and Molly, we'll be having Maddie on in a minute. She is a high school senior, conservative high school senior who's wearing a MAGA hat as we speak. God bless her. We're looking forward to having Maddie
Do you wear
on.
that to school, Maddie? You are awesome.
And she gets in trouble. Okay, guys, got to stay tuned for Maddie. Awesome. Got to stay tuned for Maddie and Molly, too, if she wants to jump on. That's the key to me, is getting the next generation of conservatives, Christian conservatives, to stand up. And that's really what Frontline America Foundation was started for, is to expose some of these organizations that we have, like Pueblo Sin Fonteras and the Latina Familia.
Latin Families
Central,
United, right?
Central, whatever. Yes, all of these. So my objective is to shine light on that. And that's why we have Hayden Ludwig with us today. Go ahead.
Exactly. Well, you mentioned three groups, and they all have warm and fuzzy names.
Yeah.
And I'm sure, Hayden, that when they instituted those, it was for a reason that they did that. To make them seem more humanitarian, I guess. But they're also kind of overtly in your face. You know what I mean? Pueblo Sin Fronteras. I mean, it's pretty much, hey, look, we don't want borders. That's what we're advocating for. But they really should be called, hey, we're going to help people break the law and come in illegally. But anyhow, I asked you, Hayden, before we left, it just seems for us here that there has to be some kind of network. There has to be some kind of communication with Pueblo Sin Fronteras and the country that they're in. And they're trying to get illegals to basically caravan too. So has any of your research detected who's on the other side of this? Are the people from Chicago flying down just great organizers? Do they have some of that Barack Obama organizational skills from Chicago? Or, what do they, there's got to be people on the other end. Are some governments helping them out in some sort? What does your research show?
Well, it's been established that Emma Lozano, the head of these organizations, has been doing these things for years. I know that she's flown down to Mexico at least one time, and I know that they have contacts down there. As I mentioned before, Ireneo Mujica has dual citizenship here in Mexico. It kind of cuts both ways. Alex Mensing is one of their spokesmen. He's held various rallies and protests in San Francisco and other parts of the country here in support of the other Pueblo people backing the last caravan physically in Mexico and Guatemala and Honduras before that. So it seems like they have a network of individuals that extends down there, although as to how far that network extends, it's hard to say.
Yeah, that's one of the frustrating things that I've seen. And they're good at hiding the true nature, the organization, the connections between the organizations. And I would assume for good reason. They don't want this information to come to light.
Yeah, I mean, this is This is typical of the professional left. They really stress grassroots for obvious reasons. It sounds sweet. It sounds democratic. In reality, though, we're talking about millions of dollars moving through a handful of organizations that have a lot of cross connections. Give Pueblo a little bit of credit. They seem to be a little more legitimate and true to their far left ideology than a lot of the other pro-illegal immigration groups. Not that that excuses them, you mind, but
yeah. Hey, Hayden, how much money do these organizations get? I'm just curious. Is there a dollar amount? Because surely they have to report, if they're not reporting individual sources of the money, there's got to be a lump total. How much are these organizations raising?
Well, it depends on the organizations. Groups like Pueblo and La Familia are pretty small. Their annual revenues are in the tens of thousands, which for the organizations we usually cover is pretty small. And in their case, I would say, again, it's more about the people that they use, the professional activists who are really dedicated. And they're probably not getting paid much of anything, but they really are hardcore believers in this Marxist-Leninist ideology. Other organizations like National Immigration Forum can go into the tens of millions of dollars. So it really depends on how professional are these professional activists.
So they could essentially do the dirty work for the people that have the big money, is what I'm assuming.
I think so. That's what my research suggests.
Yeah, they're going to get they might not be that company, but they're that organization where the big boys don't want to get their hands dirty. The big boys don't want to look like they're supporting illegality, so they're going to look for individuals or groups that will say, "Heck yeah, I'll fly down to Mexico, or I'll fly to Guatemala or El Salvador, and I'll get it going."
Well, a lot of times they gain a lot of credibility when they work alongside more established groups. Emma Lozano herself is closely connected to a group called LULAC, which, if I can remember this right, is the League of United Latin American Citizens. That's an American group that's fairly large, fairly substantial, and she's hosted workshops and town hall events, I guess, in her own church. So they are definitely connected to much, much larger organizations.
Yeah, and well, she's also, I played some audio on our last show of her eulogizing Hugo Chavez, or glorifying Hugo Chavez and Marxist policy. There's images of people in her church with Che Guevara shirts on, and so I mean, it's just the fact. This whole thing. If most Americans knew, I think there's. I don't know if you would concur this too, that you see this, but there's just a level of apathy in our country, even still. And I look at the direction we're going. We are not very far away from losing the freedoms that so many have fought and died for in years past. And I look at what organizations like this are doing, and it just absolutely makes me sick. I totally appreciate what you're doing. And where can they find you and get more information? And how can they support what you're doing to get this information out there? Because I came across, I'm like, here it is. Finally, somebody's gotten some research on this. Why are there not people in Chicago knocking on this church's door? And I think that's our next step. We'll actually be taking a trip up to Chicago. How can we help you get this information out there, besides doing this?
Ben, the best thing I can suggest for anybody is to go to our website, capitalresearch.org. That's capital with an A, so a capital like money. But also our website, influencewatch.org. Influence Watch is exactly what we created to solve this problem. There's so many organizations out there that none of us can keep track of all of them together. So we've created a database that I'm working on, my colleagues are working on every day to build out, building whole profiles on these organizations and these people so that they're always preserved, and we can always go up and search what are the connections, who's funding who used to work where. And I can tell you right now, we have substantial profiles on Emma Lozano and all these various organizations we're talking about.
And then the next step for people like myself, because you said the mainstream media is not going to do it. It's for us to go out there and confront these people and call them out for what they are, for calling them out for the enemies that they are within our country. You guys do the research, but it's our job to go call them out.
Could not agree more. Absolutely. Spread this information and talk to your friends and neighbors and family about it, and get out the word that this is just another batch of fake news.
God bless you, Hayden. Thank you for doing what you're doing. Thank Kristen for tell her thank you from me. I look forward to coming out there and meeting you guys one of these days. Again, Hayden Ludwig with I'm drawing a blank on the Capital Research Center and Influence Watch. God bless you, sir.
Hayden, thank you.